So I'll quote a moderator yesterday. I'm not actually the moderator for this session. I'm not Jen French, the founder and executive director of the Neurotech Network, but I often aspire to emulate her. So it's exciting to get to help her moderate from afar. She was unable to join the meeting even virtually, but she did. She had a vision for this panel and worked with the speakers to really craft a a panel that we are hoping you all will join and have a discussion with us. I'm Rebekah Corlew. I'm the lived experience engagement strategist for NINS. So if you ever want to hear more about how NINS, our strategy for including people with lived experience of neurological disorders into our important conversations, you can contact me, my name at nih.gov or through LinkedIn. But for this session, as I say, Jen had a vision and to have this be a discussion. So our panelists have worked hard to make their comments brief and engage in discussion with us. And to start out, Jen actually recorded an intro. Go ahead.
Welcome to this session about success stories, learning among nonprofits for ambassador programs. We are thrilled that you are here. But first, I do owe you an apology that I cannot be there with you in person. I would love to be there with you in the room, but rest assured, I'm there in spirit and you are in great hands with Rebekah Corlew. So why are we even having a session on co-learning? You know, we talk a lot about engagement and partnering, but we constantly have questions about how do we execute an engagement program? How do we engage in meaningful and collaborative ways? And how do we build valued partnerships between people with lived experience, research scientists, regulators, funding agencies, and members of industry? If you are motivated and is seeking a point where research decision-making across all stages is guided by patients' contributions as partners, recognizing their specific experiences, values, and expertise, then you are in the right place. So what are ambassadors? By definition, they're official representatives. They're people who have lived experience that are willing to share their personal stories, but they're more than that. They're also people who can speak to the needs of the broader population for a specific condition. They're people who are trained to understand the basics of the R&D process. And they're also people who are advocates in partnering in a manner to build a culture of mutual learning and effective collaboration. You know, the organizers of this forum realize and appreciate that we have a lot of talent and expertise in this event. We also recognize that there's an evolving need to build and strengthen our capacities among us. In fact, there was a recent study conducted by Faster Cures that included 53 interviews from multiple stakeholders from various fields such as developers and investors, providers, and patient advocacy organizations. And one of the key near-term findings was that we need to develop and leverage case examples, lessons learned, and trainings in patient engagement. This means that we not only need to have co-learning among our nonprofit partners, but we also need to do so in our larger research and development enterprise. And what a great way to start is to do so with the experts in the room today. And that means you. So this session is not about presentations or research finding. It's about hearing from you. This session is about the exchange of current and developing programs, the sharing of experiences and ideas from our nonprofit partners that are here at this forum, and even broadly. We have some distinguished panelists here with us today that are going to help us kick off this discussion. But in essence, we want to hear from you. What works and what doesn't? What are some of the challenges and frustrations that you've experienced? What are some of those success stories out there that you have with meaningful engagement and engagement with people with lived experience? How do we create and build capacities and capacity building programs and help to keep people who are involved with them motivated? This is your time to share, to ask, and to co-learn. I hope this session will inspire you to improve the valued work that you do. Now I'd like to hand it over to Rebekah Corlew to begin this engaging session. Thank you and have a great time today.
Thank you, Jen. I know you'll be watching this later, so thank you. I think we have the first slide. I'm going to introduce all very brief introductions that matching the pattern of what people have been doing for introductions, and then each of the speakers will take their turn. So we have Mary Margaret Diodez from who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Parkinson's Foundation, Lauren Massimo, Associate Professor, University of Pennsylvania, and Co-Director of the FTE Center, and Ian Burkhardt, the President of the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. And I think you can go to the first slide. I can go. Thank you. Mary Margaret?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the great work of the Parkinson's Foundation. As Rebekah mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Parkinson's Foundation. In that role, I oversee our programmatic work from our patient and professional education, our helpline, our centers of excellence across the board, as well as our outreach and community efforts. So I'm representing a great team behind me, and also my side gig is operations. So this is perfect for me. How do we land some of these opportunities and engage with the patient community? So as you guys probably will see if you read the bio, I'm really pleased to be here representing the Parkinson's Foundation because I've been in this space for a long time working for disease organizations, national nonprofit voluntary agencies across the board. And it's my pleasure to talk about the commitment of the Parkinson's Foundation to this community, and hope I can share with you a couple of ideas maybe you can take back and start really landing in your communities. Many of us have really good intentions when we work with patients or people with lived experiences. Through my early career, we talked about mission moments and putting a face on the mission and marketing materials and all that good stuff with really, really good intentions. But it's really nice to see that we're really coming back to that lived experience and the importance of seeing the work and experiencing a disease or an affliction through a patient's and their family's eyes. So I'm really glad to be here. And as Kareem said yesterday, we've certainly learned that engagement is more than just listening. It's actually changing your plans and refining your plans based on the feedback of the community that you're working with. So I don't think he's still here, but I wrote that down because I thought was really, really important as we talk about our work. So the Parkinson's Foundation has a really good mission, I think, right? It's two-pronged, right? We want to care for people living with the disease today, as well as we're really investing in research to find cures for the future. This is really important work. We've made some good strides in terms of our care and how we look at care across different settings. From going to your community neurologist to then going to a specialist in MDS, maybe then what happens to you in the hospital. We know the outcomes for people with Parkinson's in the hospital can be dire in some cases, as well as long-term care settings where a third of our population will end up in those settings. So we look at care across those spectrums. We also have a very significant research portfolio. My colleague, Dr. Jim Beck, is here today as well. So we invest in researchers, grantees, young investigators, basic science, and you might be aware, we also have a great the largest clinical survey for genetics for Parkinson's disease PD generation. So we're really trying to move the needle in terms of the field for Parkinson's. And we know how important that is, fueling and centering ourselves on the passion and the commitment of people with Parkinson's. And I know you all feel this way, all of you who come from nonprofits, right? The passion of your community is what helps connect you to the work. The further you are from that work in the ivory tower in your office or in your home office these days, right, the further you are away from the patient. So it's really important for this work. So we started a research advocacy program. It was built off the success of the HIV, AIDS, and breast cancer model, right, in 2008. And we really started training people and with Parkinson's living with the disease and their care partners on how to engage with research across the board, right, with industry in their communities and also collaborating with government, right? So some of the things we've been talking about. And one of the key things here I think is worth emphasizing is that we engage early and often. This is not a one and done, as we all know, right? Start talking to the community, start talking to people with these experiences, you start talking to industry partners, and you're continuously threading these messages back and forth, this bilateral communication. It's already been remarked upon, I think we can all agree, and certainly from the Parkinson's community, this process is slow. So the major therapy for Parkinson's was developed over 50 years ago. We are very anxious as a community to really help move drug discovery and development along for this community. But getting in front of this and working with our advocates early, helping them design the studies, helping them understand, as was mentioned before, what are the ground rules for the engagement that they're bringing to the table? What are those sort of rules and engagement for industry or government? How do they all play together to move this work forward? So overall, we've trained 400 people living with Parkinson's in in 42 states. So I just thought I would talk just a few minutes about our training and how we do that. This may seem basic, but maybe it wasn't so basic before, right? The curriculum has been developed with people with Parkinson's and their care partners. Let's start there, right? Get their input from the ground level is really important. We have 2 training models, an online course, and then we also have recently launched an in-person learning institute, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And these 2 models bring together sort of the best of every world, academics, researchers, people with Parkinson's, and industry in some cases. And our course sessions run the gamut. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're talking about. The power of the patient voice, right, which could be for people with Parkinson's or industry partners. Ethics and research, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. It's really important as a community for us to recognize when we're reaching out to diverse populations that hasn't maybe been the best experience. In some cases, there's a historical background in terms of how these people are being engaged with clinical trials or other work that we're doing. We need to be mindful and recognize that story and that history for certain populations. How to evaluate and assess the data, and then also just the overall research process. Many of us are so steeped in the research process, we don't realize that other folks don't know how to run a research program, what that takes, what the investment means, and what it looks like from different sides of the equation. So again, we realize this is not one and done. We're continuously talking and monitoring the process as we do the training. And again, coming back to bi-directional learning, right? So as we're having these conversations, we continue to refine our courses and our conversations. We share the knowledge back with our partners. We share our knowledge back with the industry partners and with the people with Parkinson's to help keep them guided towards the work that we're trying to do. And a great example of this is with our PD generation program. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. It's a genetic testing program. We return results. Right, so we're giving those with support, right, with a genetic counselor to explain the results. Do you have one of the 7 genes, the markers for Parkinson's disease? And then we just spent a lot of time this morning talking about evaluation feedback. That's of course important in the work that we do as well. We survey our patients and people with Parkinson's. How is the experience? What did they learn? And how can we do that better? So this really helps us maximize the efficiency of the program. Second, I'll touch on our People with Parkinson's Advisory Council. 2 weeks into my job here at the Parkinson's Foundation, I found myself in Miami with 15 people with Parkinson's and their care partners talking about how they wanted to engage with the Parkinson's Foundation. This is a serious commitment from our organization. It's part of our bylaws. They don't have fiduciary responsibilities, but we meet with them once a month. John Lear and I, the CEO, and I meet with them once a month to hear their input on our programs, our strategic plan. We recently, again, using PD Gene as an example, we changed from a buccal swab for your nose, which everyone's used to now because of COVID, right? to a blood sample in your arm. Imagine what that's like for people with Parkinson's. It's not a quick flip, right? So we had a lot of feedback. We listened and engaged that community, and we're starting to make changes to the directions based on that feedback. In addition, we fold them into all of our programmatic work. We have one member of those committees advising us on each. So any staff person working on those, the department heads can call and talk to that particular person with Parkinson's. They've identified they might be interested in general neurology outreach, and they're sort of our point person for that activity. Also, I have to say, they also support us in the community. They do media appearances, all those kinds of things. We train them to do those media appearances, satellite radio tours, and they're also really great advocates for us in the community, sharing our materials as well as doing fundraising for us. And third, not least by any means, is our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know how important it is to create a diverse community of research advocates and people with Parkinson's. As we talked about a little bit yesterday with AI, we know that the baseline is white Europeans in Parkinson's disease in terms of genetic background, symptoms, et cetera. And we are working really hard to bring more people into the conversation to make sure that we are broadening both the genetic pool, but also the cultural experiences. Most of our materials are in Spanish. We have a Spanish initiative across our organization that I also oversee, as well as reaching out to the Black and African American community. So I'll just give you two quick examples of that work. One is our Promotores de Salud program, which is community health workers. We partner with this organization across the country. They are embedded in the community, talk to people of Hispanic background of the resources that we have at the Parkinson's Foundation, also the symptoms and signs of Parkinson's. As many of us will not be surprised in this community, having Parkinson's has a little bit of a stigma. So we're also working on the cultural side to make sure that people are getting the care that they need through this program. And then the other program that we've been doing, I mentioned earlier, our in-person learning is the Learning Institute. And we're focusing on the Black and African American community. Last September in Atlanta, with support from Morehouse Medical College, we actually brought together a group of Black and African American community members, and also had speakers from the community talking about just what we were saying, right? What's the history? What is a clinical trial? How do you get involved in clinical trials? And of the 38 people there, by the end of the couple of days we were together, everyone had participated in the PD gene testing. So we're able to bring that loop all the way around in terms of our outreach, and then helping them understand the importance of research and being involved as part of our study. So with that, I'll just say I'm delighted to be here. I think true engagement is a key to the work that all of us need to do, leveraging partners in the community for so many reasons, but not the least of which is that we all come from places where we don't have a lot of resources, but also being culturally sensitive to the community is really important, and the training and support, right? We need to make sure that we're resourcing these groups, and we're thoughtful about the curriculum and taking that feedback and folding it into the work that we do. Thanks.
Thank you. So just a reminder, we'll have discussion at the end. So write down those questions and then your comments. Next speaker is Ian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Burkhart. I am the president of the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. I'd first like to thank the organizers there at NINDS for offering this opportunity for us. And I want to send my condolences and apologies for not being there in person. I know that it's fantastic to be able to network with all of you there. And I know we have some of our organization partners there in person with the Neurotech Institute, and then also folks from the Reeve organization that I saw were previously online. But I'd like to just share a little bit about what we do at NASCIC. And we are a grassroots organization that really was created by individuals with lived experience. Our mission is to bring about unified achievements in research, care, cure, and policy by supporting collaborative efforts across the spinal cord injury community. And we really decided to put our first flag in the ground when the organization was formed about 6 or 7 years ago, with focusing on research and getting individuals engaged in research, not just as research participants and being, the guinea pigs of the research, but actually helping drive that research and making sure it's research that is focusing on issues the community wants and that is really important to the community. To do this, we have our project review committee that ensures that all engagement is authentically represented for the community, and this helps combat somewhat of some tokenistic efforts that can be done when funding agencies are requiring someone with lived experience being a part of the grant, but it's viewed more of just a checkbox like was mentioned in the talk previously versus that true engagement. And in order to do that, we have a group of individuals. This is roughly 10 individuals on our committee, all individuals with lived experience. The vast majority of them are living with a spinal cord injury themselves. And then we also have some caregivers and then also some clinicians that have worked closely with the field and with individuals with spinal cord injury. And they review any application that we get from academic and industry partners in order to bring together individuals to make sure that these projects are something that the community itself wants. Previously, there's a lot of kind of misconceived perceptions about what individuals with spinal cord injury really care about. Everyone, not everyone, but a lot of the general public see it as, oh, they just want to get out of their wheelchairs and walk again. And, there's a lot of other secondary conditions that really lead to very much challenging your independence and your everyday quality of life that aren't related to mobility. So our project review committee makes sure that these projects all kind of align with our mission and that they are something that the community itself would want. Additionally, to the project review committee, we have our spinal cord injury research advocacy course. And this is an educational platform that we launched last year that really is able to allow advocates and researchers to be on a level playing field. It's a great way that we can prepare our constituents to be good advisors to industry, science, and research and other partners because it equips individuals with lived experience to have the right knowledge to educate and advocate for other individuals with spinal cord injury. So the course itself, it consists of multiple modules, and it teaches someone with a spinal cord injury or a caregiver all about the research process so that they feel like they are educated enough to understand and speak at a high level to researchers about what the community wants. Also, there's a portion of the course that teaches researchers about what it's like living with a spinal cord injury to really balance that playing field once again, so we can be on the same level field and make sure that everyone understands where each party is coming from to better work together. Additionally, in order to, once we approve these projects and find good projects, we have our project engagement database that allows for matching of advocates. So a lot of these projects that we do revolves around building a community advisory board for each individual project, which we like to form a diverse group of individuals based on all sorts of demographics, but mostly around the level of spinal cord injury and also the interest of that particular project and what it's trying to solve, to make sure that the advocates are going to be passionate about that project and it's something that they feel really knowledgeable about. So that way we can kind of get the most out of our advocacy and the work that we're doing with these partners to make sure that we're able to really push forward any improvement in care, cure, and policy in the spinal cord injury field. And I think that that's one of the big challenges generally when you're trying to have patient engagement is making sure that it's not a tokenistic and checkbox approach, but it is something where there's very good feedback coming from both sides of the conversation and, trying to, acknowledge that there is a distinct power imbalance between researchers and individuals with lived experience and give people the knowledge and the power to understand that they can speak truthfully about their own individual experiences and the experiences of others in the community in order to share that knowledge with researchers and then also allow researchers to understand where the community is coming from and making sure that there's a good dialogue between both parties. This really allows for authentic representation of the community as much as possible, and we do that in order to make sure that the projects that are being funded and that are being worked on are something that is in the end going to positively impact the community as much as possible. So with that, I think I'm just about up with time. But I would like to mention also that, our organization is, almost, I'd say it's 95% run by individuals with lived experience, with spinal cord injuries and caregivers. All of our officers are into people with spinal cord injuries. Our executive council is full of individuals with spinal cord injuries and caregivers. And so it really is something where we're, trying to level the playing field as much as possible as far as giving individuals that live it day in and day out the ability to then amplify that research and have a bigger impact. So thank you so much, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Ian. And our final panelist is Lauren.
Okay, hi everyone. You're almost there, right? All right. So I want to thank the NINDS organizers and my favorite nonprofit organization, the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration, the AFTD. So two of my favorite people, Penny and Susan, are here today. I'm just so thankful for the invitation to come here to speak about our newly created Research Ambassador Program. We just launched this program in June. So I'm going to talk about this process. I'm Lauren Massimo, and I co-direct the Penn Frontotemporal Degeneration Center at the University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the largest centers in the United States that's dedicated to research and clinical care for persons with frontotemporal degeneration or FTD. I'm an academic researcher. I'm not from a nonprofit, not from a patient advocacy group, but I do consider myself a strong patient advocate. So some of you may know that FTD is a neurodegenerative condition, and as the name implies, it causes disease in the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. It's an early onset form of dementia affecting people in their 50s and 60s. And for people under the age of 60, it's the most common form of dementia. Patients with FTD can present with a range of clinical symptoms from drastic personality changes in behavior. They can have difficulty with speech and language, and we can see motor impairment. So you can see that there is a wide variation in the different types of clinical symptoms that individuals with FTD may have. And because these symptoms aren't the typical symptoms that people present with when we think of dementia, individuals with FTD are often underdiagnosed for many years. Unfortunately, FTD is a life-limiting illness, and there currently is no way to prevent or to slow FTD, but the research in FTD is really rapidly advancing. So for nearly 20 years, the University of Pennsylvania FTD Center has been working to educate the community, both locally in the Philadelphia area and nationally, about early onset dementia so we can raise awareness and we can increase research participation. The Penn FTD Center expertise ranges from studies of clinical pathological nature, biomarker discovery, genetics, neuroimaging, neuropsychology, and cognitive neuroscience investigations of language and of social behavior. And the idea is that we're all working towards, all these studies are working towards a cure for FTD. We also participate in large consortia study, like the All FTD Initiative. And all of these mechanistic studies, the observational work that has been done has really led to a really exciting time in FTD where we have clinical trials that are available. So there are several clinical trials that are very promising, but the problem is that we are having trouble enrolling participants. So now that you have some of that background, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. I met a very motivated care partner whose name is Wanda about 1.5 years ago. Wanda comes from a family where there are multiple members of her family that are affected with FTD. So their family has a genetic form of FTD. And Wanda is a fierce advocate for FTD. Her motto is, I live my life with goals. And boy, does she. When I met Wanda, I knew that we were going to start working on things. And one of the things that she mentioned to me is that there are persons with lived experience out there that are really hungry for research information. And she convinced me that we need to help persons with lived experience to be better consumers of research. And so Wanda mentioned that she attended an ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute and that she wanted to do this for FTD. And I was so touched and so motivated by Wanda that I couldn't say no. By doing this, our vision was to really generate a pipeline of FTD research ambassadors who would go into their own networks, their own communities, spread the word about FTD research, increase awareness around FTD, and engage with the NIH, engage with industry sponsors and regulators about the challenges and the opinions that they have that's related to research. So our goal was to create the FTD Clinical Research Learning Institute to empower those with lived experiences to be their own advocates in the field of FTD. And we did this by educating them on the clinical research process, I think probably similar to your program. I strongly believe that we are better together. So there was a team of us that developed this program. So it was, of course, Wanda, it was myself, and then we partnered with the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. So we had, again, academia, we had a patient advocacy group, and then we had a person with lived experience. We really are a team, and I really am representing that team. The Clinical Research Learning Institute program was modeled after other research ambassador programs that are in the clinical research field, such as the ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute that's organized by the Northeast ALS Consortium, the NEALS Consortium. And the ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute has been hugely successful. They've been doing this since 2011. And so we thought, why recreate the wheel? Let's tap into what we know works. And so I want to just give a shout out to Dr. Richard Bedlack, who was so gracious with his time. He met with Wanda and I. He shared his experiences, what he's learned from developing the program over 10+ years. And then he generously shared his materials with us. So again, I think that was really huge for us to get this program launched. A little bit about the process. We really viewed this as a pilot program. We wanted to see if there was going to be interest. We thought that there was. We wanted to demonstrate there was going to be interest. We wanted to make sure that this was going to be feasible to do. So the search for ambassadors began in January 2024 with a call for applications. And the application portal was open for a month. We received 70 applications from individuals from the United States, from Canada, India, and Australia. So there was a need. People wanted to do this program. We ultimately ended up selecting just 12 individuals. Again, this was really a pilot program. We did not have any funding to do this program. So this was really, we needed to keep it on a smaller scale. The participants were notified in March of their selection, and then we had a virtual program in June. So for the virtual program, our presentations, the curriculum included topics like the intersection of observational research and clinical trials, right? Observational research is so important, right? And it can feed and help us learn and help us with the development of clinical trials. And I think that people really need to understand that. There was also a session on the logistics of conducting clinical trials, what some of the challenges are conducting clinical trials. We talked about the phases of clinical trials and drug development. There was a session on ethics. And then there was a session on opportunities and tips for FTD advocacy. So again, we wanted not only to provide our ambassadors with the education, but we also wanted them to feel empowered so they could go out and to educate the community and to be engaged with other folks doing FTD research. So the ambassador program was really designed to be more than just a one-day event, right? We want to keep the momentum going. So to do this, we will hold quarterly meetings, with our first meeting that's going to be held in September. We have monthly newsletters that shares what the FTD research landscape looks like and new research. And we also see ourselves as a pipeline for feeding our research ambassadors opportunities to interact with folks like industry, NIH, and other researchers. So the Penn FTD Center and the AFTD and Wanda, we're going to continue to work on developing this program to increase awareness and knowledge of FTD research. And I love this quote from one ambassador. I'm hoping that with this certification title, that I can be placed in conversations where I can advocate with entities like NIH, NINDS, and FDA. So we are really hopeful. We think that we filled a really important gap in FTD research, and we anticipate growing this program and growing our cadre of ambassadors. I'm hoping one day we'll reach 400. That's a great goal to set. Wait till I tell Wanda. She really, like I said, she really likes to set goals. But we really think that these FTD research ambassadors are going to make a huge impact in FTD research. So thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, and our speakers. So again, we wanted this to be a discussion. So if you have questions or if you have your own programs that you want to share tidbits out of, if you're developing something, please step up to the mic. Jen actually provided me with some really great questions that I'll start out with. And I'm really excited about this one. So I'm going to jump to number 4 that she gave me, which is how do you prepare both organizers and the people with lived experience, the ambassadors, to have fruitful discussions in the meetings that they're joining? So if any of the speakers have thoughts on that, or if the audience has thoughts on that.
I think it's similar, right? Yeah. Just like Lauren was saying, I think it's really important to empower them, to educate them so they understand the process and they feel more confident in how they're showing up, and also set those guidelines, right? As you set up the interactions, making sure that the roles are as clear as they can be, right? As you facilitate those conversations, right? Just setting those, as Ian was saying too, right? That concept of a level playing field, as much as we can level that playing field.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, even during the application process, the expectations, right, I think are clear, clearly set. When we were also selecting presenters, so folks who were going to deliver the curriculum, right, these were mostly FTD experts. It was really important that we made sure that the presenters were going to be communicating the information to a level that would be easily understandable for people that have never been engaged in the research process before. So one of our sessions was actually on statistics. Like, so we really had to look at that content and say, this content needs to be delivered in a way where people who have never, don't know what a t-test is, can understand kind of what that means. So I think that kind of the level at which you delivered the information was really important. And we had one-on-one conversations with our presenters. So there was a lot of planning that goes into this.
Ian, did you have anything to add, or should we go to the next question?
Yeah, I would just add that it's great to make sure that, you know, you're
on Thursdays at 10 on TBS.
It's great to make sure that you're using common knowledge language between all of the partners, because you don't want to be talking about something that's going way above someone's head. But I think also just education can be really helpful to make sure that people understand what they're getting themselves into, but also feel comfortable asking questions for things that they're not quite sure of.
Great, thanks. We'll start with the first question, and just remember to say who you are and where you're from.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Just want to, again, first and foremost, say thank you for the incredible presentations. My name is Brian Canavan. I serve as the Vice President of the Neurotech Institute in Ohio. We're a newly formed independent 501c3 aimed at cutting the time between discovery and approved medical device. I want to say personally thank you to Ian as well as a shout out, who serves as one of our ambassadors. The Neurotech's, all of our research is guided by those with lived experience, and Ian is incredible. So the question, a little bit aimed at Ian, but would love to get all of your feedback. Ian, one of the things that I think you do really well, serving as an ambassador for the Neurotech Institute, Unite to Fight, the consortium, Reeves, I don't know how you find all the time to do all these things, but you do a really good job of serving on many different groups and kind of being that uniting voice. So I wanted to ask, I guess, one, what do you feel is the role as an ambassador, and how best practices have you felt like your role serving as a connector between different nonprofits, academia, advocacy on the state level and national level, and just giving some advice maybe for those on how you do that so well?
Yeah, I think it's really goes back to one of the founding forces behind the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium, was to make sure that there's not two groups in different parts of, you know, the states or within North America that are working on similar problems that have no idea that each other are working on it. And, you know, the whole kind of idea is to, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time and start from scratch every single time we're focusing on a program. We want to leverage everything that we've been able to do in the past to make sure that things are going forward in a right manner, and also that they can be translated quicker, because you know, the mantra within the spinal cord injury community is, and it's now somewhat of a joke, is, oh, just wait 5 more years, there'll be a cure. And it's like, okay, well, 5 years comes and goes multiple times for a lot of people, but being able to leverage everything that's been done historically, I think, is really important. And then also combining groups and, you know, doing that matchmaking between aligning people that are working on similar projects, so that you're not just working in silos, is really important.
Thank you.
We have a question from the chat.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions and comments, but I'll start here with this is Katie, Richard. This is for Ian. I'm curious about advice for how to connect with people in that early post-injury phase, when there may be unique opportunities to get involved in research, but when there's so much to manage in terms of rehabilitation workload, social, psychological, emotional processing, not even knowing what outcomes may be important to an individual, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really tough because with you know, the vast majority of spinal cord injuries are traumatic and, you know, abrupt onset. There is just so much being thrown at you. It's really challenging. And so, you know, you may not even be at a point where you're wanting to receive information. You're still kind of coping and dealing with this big adjustment in your life. But the best thing to do is be able to at least connect to some sort of organization or some sort of a knowledge base. So that way, when you do have questions, you know where to turn. That's a future project, or one that's kind of ongoing right now that we're working on, is really being able to collate good resources as much as possible for individuals, so that way they know exactly what they're going to be approaching. It's really important to make sure that individuals are able to get the information that they need when they want it, and also even sometimes before they want it, because they'll need it later. But I'd love to hear what both Lauren and Mary Margaret have as far as, with their different conditions. It definitely is differing, but it's always just, drinking from a fire hose of so much information that's out there.
I agree, Ian. I appreciate that. I mean, one of the efforts we have is newly diagnosed outreach program. So again, to your point, Ian, there's a lot of information when you're newly diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. There's a lot of things coming at you. Similarly, I would expect a little bit, Ian. And I think it's providing the information and the resources. So it's sort of the living with the lived experience can take advantage of those resources when they're ready. So helping them understand what is available and ways that they can navigate that diagnosis and what's next. And, hopefully that opportunity to be more active as they work through that first sort of 6 to 12 months of that diagnosis, knowing that there are opportunities for them to advocate and be more engaged if that's a way that they want to tackle their diagnosis and the disease.
Take another one from there, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. You can answer it.
Right. Hi, Paul Gross from the CP Research Network. So this is a bit of a swirl of my past questions between compensation and training and power imbalances and whatnot. But I find that what we're doing reasonably well is getting questions that investigators have that have been vetted against a truly developed community set of priorities. But like Penny said, it's pretty much so a laundry list. And I'm wondering if anybody's developed a great way to get community members really involved really early in truly defining questions, because there's all those educational issues. And what I find is I can get people involved episodically and reactively, but I think there would be a lot that could come from something that is more at the generative phase, as opposed to trying to do pairing and vetting and things like that. So I'm just curious if anybody has found a process that works with all of those other challenges and constraints.
I don't think I can save you, but I would say that it's a huge challenge, right? I think long-term engagement of community members, including from families who've been affected, not just in the immediacy of when they're first hit by a disease, but long-term, being willing to bring in caregivers who've maybe gone through an initial trauma and want to give back to the community, but then are willing to learn and engage long-term. I was also really impressed with what Lauren led about training people, not just, I mean, some of the curriculum in that program going into statistics, right? This isn't about just listening from what your story is. This is about empowering people with the information and tools so that they can be more effective partners in that space. And it was a narrow number of people. And I think there's a question of how much you can also scale up, because you can't have that many folks engaged just in terms of the magnitude of effort that it can involve both on them as well as on the folks wanting to receive it. But I was really impressed with what you guys said.
I'll add too that we at NINS have gained immensely from working with ambassadors from these programs in exactly what you're talking about, in those conversations that are preclinical, pre-study, or very early kind of priority setting, and finding out from the community what the research priorities are. So including those people that have gone through these ambassador programs has been extremely helpful to making those conversations fruitful.
So I don't know if this answers your question or not. This is Alice Foxworth from the Huntington's Disease Society of America. co-principal invest on, sorry, I don't know what the issue is, on several PCORI grants where we convened academics, researchers, the patient community, the lived experience community, caregivers for a full day workshop where ahead of time we did a systematic literature review to see what research had been done in that category. And then you had done some surveys ahead of time to the community on what areas and topics of research were of interest. And then all these stakeholders were together for a day where then through a series of exercises and programs, we were able then to devise a list of, from the bottom up, that this is what the community is saying the research topics that they're interested in. That then gets turned into a report for PCORI that I hope is used by PCORI when they're evaluating contracts and grant opportunities, that they're looking at the list of research topics that have been generated from the bottom up that the community says, this is what we need to be researching, and that then that they're awarding those grants based on that. So I don't know if that was what your question was or not, but.
Yeah. Diane, do you have another?
Yeah. Yes, we have a question from Tracy Wheeler for Ian. Approximately what % of engagement placement are in clinical versus preclinical research? Do you use the same preparatory / matching process for both clinical and preclinical, or do you have do you have special processes to make engagement matches in highly specialized genetic, cellular, or biomedical studies?
Great question, Tracy. Thank you for posing that. A lot of our engagement is mostly in clinical and clinical translational work. We do have a decent amount that's in preclinical research in the animal models, and those definitely change a little bit because the questions that are being asked are a little bit different from the advisory board members and then to the researchers. We pretty much do use the same preparatory materials within our research advocacy course. We have modules both on clinical and preclinical work. But what changes is in the matchmaking process within our project engagement database, we kind of ask individuals and what they're most interested in. Because I think that just helps form better engagement. If you have someone that's really interested in the biology aspect of it, then that's something that, they're more knowledgeable about, and we try to match those up with more of the preclinical projects versus a translational project.
Hi, everybody. Laura Lubbers, Cure Epilepsy. I have a practical but perhaps somewhat sensitive question for you all. Clearly, this is such an important topic, and you have invested tremendous resources in building tools, toolkits for people to be engaged, and that's lauded. How everything we do takes time and resources. How have you approached donors? How do you resource this for groups that would want to think about doing more? What have the challenges been? Is this readily received? What kind of advice can you give groups as they think about this and then think about the resourcing for it?
I am like all ears right now, and I would love. I'm really here to learn because our program is in its infancy. So we did not, as I mentioned, we did not have any support. We did not have any funding. It was manpower hours. And the passion that we all feel for this initiative. If anyone has a large pocketbook out there, lmassimo@upenn.edu.
I think it's a great question. I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, right? And goes back to sustainability and the investment, right? So we've had a program for a while. We have a lot of resources aimed at this with staff both on the programmatic side and the volunteer engagement side. But it does help support, keeping those relationships. I think Edgar said this in the last session, keeping those relationships going with industry and other partners does help sort of build that momentum and the flywheel. I will also say that, the work that we've been doing and that we're very proud of doing in populations of focus has actually led us to even more funding behind it. So I know it's tricky because if you don't have the resources, how do you prove that you need the resources? But I do think that once you get the program started, looking at how maybe it's even a smaller sort of approach, like a pilot approach, that you get started and get some funding around versus, there's an opportunity. And I think we're all anxious to boil the ocean, right? And figure out how to bring in so many people and really accelerate the process. But perhaps starting with a smaller group might help build some momentum and funding.
I have a follow-up question to that. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, sorry. I'd just like to mention a little bit for us on the funding aspect, how we have attacked this as, multi-pronged. Our research advocacy course was funded greatly in part by the Nielsen Foundation for Spinal Cord Injury Research. And they've been a huge partner of ours since our inception. Really historically looking at the problem of solving clinical trial recruitment issues, because you can have all these great projects, but if you don't have participants to be in the clinical trials, then you're not going to go anywhere. And by engaging people with lived experience early on, you're able to then create clinical trials that are attractive to individuals to participate in. Additionally, for our matchmaking and ongoing efforts there, we make sure that individuals with lived experiences are compensated for their time using the fair price calculator that was mentioned earlier for those rates. And then also there's a charge to the researchers for some overhead costs that allow us to continue on with that matchmaking, whether that be for academics or industry partners.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up add on to that question, and really to the audience too. If you have an answer to this, raise your hand. So you all have different models. There's an asynchronous course that you can take. There's in-person things. There, even from the audience, we heard of a day-long discussion and kind of an immersion with scientists working together and learning that way. And as you're thinking about launching something, how do you choose is your platform choice based on resources? Is it based on your audience abilities? Is it based on the current climate of legislation in your towards your disorder? What is that decision based on?
I can, with the FTD Research Ambassador Program, it was really resource driven. Like I said, we did not have funding for this pilot to go about launching the program. So this was a virtual program. However, we conducted an evaluation after the program, and the attendees want it to be in person. They want to meet other ambassadors. They want to have in-person conversations. They want to connect with researchers in person. So our goal is to eventually do this in person.
For us, it was somewhat similar as far as we wanted to make sure that it's really a platform that anyone can gain access to. So our research course is available on desktop and mobile, but we did it mostly virtually because that's where our individuals are, and we're so sporadically placed geographically. And also it's can be really challenging for individuals with spinal cord injuries to travel as well. So that was our main driving force, but we do make sure that we kind of balance kind of asynchronous with synchronous communication as well, where we have webinars pretty frequently and open up the end of those for just questions and answers to make sure. And, those are then also recorded for people to watch at a later time, because everyone, that's participating is really balancing a lot of other balls in the air with just living their life. And, not everyone wants to be an advocate full time. I think, a quote I saw not too long ago is, I'm not an advocate because I wanted to be, I'm an advocate because I have to be. And I think that can go along for anyone that's here. It's, once you learn about some of these struggles, it's really something that you feel so passionate and working towards. But just giving anyone the information and power to be able to then share their own experience and leverage that further, I think is really important.
Yeah, I would just add one. We did do, as I mentioned, for the Black African American community, we did in person last September with the idea that there was a lot of momentum and the being in person was very powerful. We've learned it was too long, too many days, which was, difficult in a lot of respects. But the idea with that and bringing them together in person is now that they're going back to their communities and then starting similar smaller group settings in those communities, Chicago and North Carolina. So we brought them together, and the idea of problem meeting in their own communities and creating, little networks from their connections and some of the other work that we're doing. So knitting those pieces together. So we'll see. We're planning Chicago and North Carolina, so we can let you know how it goes.
I have an internet question, and then we'll go to.
All right, we've got kind of two questions that seem maybe brief, so I'll fold them into kind of one. So James Salter asked, how are your organizations funded? And Janet Thompson asked, is there an ideal mix of advisory council members, individuals with lived experience, and caregivers?
I'll take the second part of that question to start. I think there is an ideal mix, but it's not something that we can be so prescriptive about. It's going to be very nuanced and very kind of project by project or situation by situation. But I think the most important thing is just having a diverse group of individuals there. Whenever you're trying to get a limited number of advocates to kind of represent a whole disease or condition perspective, it's really challenging. And so you want to make sure that you're having diversity within those groups as much as possible, but also making sure that you're providing the most well-educated and correct advocates for that particular project.
I'll just follow up as it specifically relates to the Research Ambassador Program and who we selected for the program. It was we were blinded to the names of the applicants, but we did want to make sure that we had diversity in terms of having persons with FTD that were represented in the group. FTD, we wanted to make sure that we had there are various subtypes of FTD. We wanted to make sure that we had representation of people with behavioral variant frontotemporal degeneration and the primary progressive aphasia. We wanted to make sure that we had a distribution of spousal caregivers and caregivers who were children. We also had quite a few persons who were from families of genetic families, and that some of those individuals were pre-symptomatic. So we tried to have diverse representation in our applicants.
Yeah, similar for us. I mean, I think it's super important, both the points that Lauren and Ian are making. Certainly for one group that's easy for me to explain is the PPAC group, the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council. About a third of those folks are care partners. They could be adult children or spouses. And then we're very, as Ian said, we're very intentional from a geography standpoint, experience standpoint, how far along they are within their, from their initial diagnosis, what their ethnic and racial background is, et cetera. So we also have a very intense screening process where, there's an application and we interview all the finalists before they are assigned or are put on the committee. We had about 80 people apply this past year, and we filled 6 spots of the 15. So it's fairly competitive process for making sure that we're filling some of those commitments that we have internally around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I'd love to hear how you match the training and the recruitment with follow-on action items for the people who go through the training. And I'm just reflecting on a couple aspects of how many different use cases were described earlier this morning in the places where patient voices can be or caregiver voices can be so important, as well as on the other side, the stuff that wasn't discussed, like training folks to come here to the NIH, right? Training folks to go to the Hill to advocate for more attention to what your community needs. So, and the risk of having people go through training and then not having follow-on things for them to do. Because that is also like, if the research space isn't quite matured enough that there's actually that appetite for continued real in-depth engagement, where you almost backfire. You get people all jazzed up and trained, and then we got one opportunity for you in a year, and that might not be enough. So just curious on that goal connection there.
Ian, do you have something you want me to jump in?
You can go ahead, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. I think it's a really good point. And one of the ways that we balance that is we do offer opportunities for people with Parkinson's to be engaged in other ways, right? In their community, they can be involved in our walk program if they want to get together a team to support that. They can also be speakers. We do a lot of on-the-ground seminars, symposium, et cetera, right? We're bringing people into the community to talk about certain parts of navigating Parkinson's disease. So there's an opportunity for them to engage there. We also have a field network, so we have volunteer opportunities on local boards. So I think it is tricky, but making sure that there's some action for them to take is really important, so that when that true research opportunity comes back around, they're still engaged. We also do quite a bit of outreach through some of our, we have a very longstanding hospital care sort of program, and trained a bunch of ambassadors to share our materials. Again, as I mentioned before, 1/3 of our population will be in the hospital, whether planned or not, to make sure that we have better outcomes. So it's really thinking about, I think it's a really good point, right? To think about other ways you can keep them engaged and connected to the mission as those opportunities arise.
I think this will be our final question or comment.
Well, thank you all for this. I'm Lisa Detton-Cooper with National Council of Dementia Minds. I'm pretty new to the second week in the job, but I really appreciate hearing about the programs that you've developed to empower, to train research ambassadors, the patients, the individuals living with the conditions. Have you kind of on the other side developed any sorts of toolkits or guidance for researchers to be more effective in including like people with FTD, any sorts of best practices as far as making sure that the information that they receive and review is something that is in a format that they can read, to make sure that, say, they get enough reminders of meetings and things like that. Kind of the flip side, you train the person living with, but are you also training or developing protocols for the researchers?
So not specifically through our research ambassador, but the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration is definitely doing that. And I think that that's what's so wonderful about the program that we've developed, is that we at the University of Pennsylvania academic setting partner very closely with the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. And I think that is really key.
Yeah, we've certainly added parts to our training course that are geared directly towards researchers to understand the condition fully, and making sure that they understand, where someone's coming from, what those issues can withhold, and then kind of both to answer your question and also the previous question too, after every engagement, we do a post survey to both the advisors that we put on an advisory board for the individuals with lived experience, and then also the researchers to make sure that they gained what they thought what they were going to gain from the project, and that everything went, to kind of the conditions that they were understood of. I think it's really important to make sure that you're always looking back to making sure that what you're implementing is right. And we find that, through that, we have constantly changed some of our placements, strategies, and how we put individuals together with different research projects.
Okay, before I invite Walter back up to give general thank yous and comments, I want to thank our panelists, not only for your presentations now, but for doing this. It's so obviously important and impactful to me, and I think everyone else. So thank you for making your programs.